Who all was here last time? Because we're on literally like what at part 3, I believe, of pricing boot camp. So we're going to do a quick recap on some of the things that we have hit in the last couple of classes, right? And then I think today we're going to be starting right at that 7-point pricing strategy. All right. Can't remember which page it is, but as you kind of follow through the recap, we'll come right to it. So first things first, why are we here? Right? Because every time that we come to a class, we would like to have a kind of specific reason that we're here, right? I don't want you just coming just to gain general knowledge, although that is a good thing, right? I encourage that, but I really want you guys coming to the classes looking for something specific, right? An area of your business that you want to improve on. Okay, so Ryan, why are you here? I'm gonna say general knowledge.
General knowledge, but specifically it's because I don't know much about pricing and how that process works. So it is general knowledge, but because that's where my shortfall is.
Okay.
Is in that general knowledge of pricing, the process that's involved in that, the steps involved in that. I don't know what I don't know, so I'm gonna figure out what I don't know.
Okay. All right, we're gonna be talking about the process today, so glad you're here. Joe?
Overall, basically, I want to look like I know what I'm doing, so.
Okay, you're trying to build that confidence, right? Yeah, so I know as newer agents, that's an important thing, right? Well, hopefully as you go through this, you'll gain more confidence. Robert?
I would like to be able to build a skill to avoid the awkward silences, the pauses, the uhs, just roll into it and have it nailed down and know what my process is, put it in place and be confident in what I want.
Okay, I think, you guys have hit on a big thing is we should have a process we use whenever we go to list a house, right? Every time you take that initial phone call, there should be a process that we get into, right? It shouldn't just be random, shouldn't be reactive. It's very intentional, right? Very purposeful. When I get that call, I know exactly what happened. My process triggers, right? You guys have one built out in the drive, right? 123 steps, I believe. And it starts with that initial questionnaire, right? With that seller. So yes, when you get into your process, if you're familiar with your process, it builds that confidence, right? Then the other piece is what? The scripting piece is huge, right? That will help eliminate the uhs and the ums and those awkward silences where you're trying to think of, oh man, what do I say now, right? I think we've all been there early on for sure, right? But we definitely want to move past that, get very good with our scripting. That objection skill set journal is going to be an excellent tool for that. Bree?
Just be reminded, we're always in a different mindset or different spot in our journey. So just to gain anything that I can close any gaps of our process that I have.
Okay, so we're back to process again, but you hit on something. It's like we're always evolving, right? You will be a different agent next week than you are today, right? The next month you'll be another, you'll be different again, right? The class evolves, right? I'm never going to get up and say the same thing twice. The core concepts are always going to be the same, right? But the goal of every class is for you guys to take one or two little things to shore up the business, right? And then we spar it, we study that, we practice it, take action, and we come back to class again, reinforce it. Is that right? Yes, it is. We move to the next piece, right? That's how we evolve. All right, Megan?
Can I be specific?
Please be specific.
Okay, in the house in Raymore, I'm pricing it $290 to $330. And that's the reason why it's difficult is because it has a pool, it has 2 different decks, like a 330 home that I have, but it's newer than the 330 home. So it's not 290, it's in 290 and 330. So I'm trying to figure out where I am in that range. That's a lot of money to just where I put the house. Yeah, and so it's just tricky. They got a newer house, and have a pool, but the older house with more, but it was 330. So I'm trying to figure out where, my gap, I know that. But where between there.
Okay, well, hopefully we'll give you some clarity today as we go through the process. Harry?
I'm here to share knowledge.
That's good. We're always happy to have knowledge, especially from experienced agents, right? Hopefully you pick up a nugget or two. Sarah?
I would love to change my conversation a little bit. So like I love the 7-step pricing strategy. That just sounds different than coming in with look through comps and let's, obviously that's part of it, but yeah, so just enhance the conversation.
Yeah, so to that point, what are the 2 things that sellers generally want to know? when you walk up, they wanna know what, I heard,
Price and how.
what are you gonna sell it for, what are you gonna do to get it sold, right? You have yours or you need one. This, my heart's such good to see every seat in the room full. Okay, that's the two things that they're generally gonna ask you, right? We should have answers to that, right? And I think we covered some of that previously, we'll recap again, but what is my response to that? What should my immediate response be? If somebody says, what are you gonna sell it for?
Let me tell you about my profit.
Okay, I want to, okay, but can we expound on that a little bit more? What does that verbiage sound like when they say, what are you gonna sell it for?
First, I'd like to take a tour of the home and give you a specific amount.
Okay, okay, so I definitely wanna take a tour before we start talking pricing, right? To confirm what I already believe in my mind, yeah,
I usually say that I have comps that I've looked at that are comparable to your home, and so I hope that we can come to a good price together on what we
Okay.
get the home for compared to the comps we have, that the market dictates.
Okay. All right. Okay, anybody else?
It's a great
Great.
question. I brought my 7-step strategy price to figure out together or to find out together.
Is that what you actually have said before, or is that just brownie points for the class?
That is what I have.
Okay, good, yeah, that's what it is, right? It's like, man, that's a great question, I'm really glad that you asked, right? I have prepared a very detailed set of pricing tools, I use what I call a 7-step pricing strategy, right? Because remember, it's not about my ability to price a home, we agree? Do we agree that most competent agents can price a home?
Yes.
They can, right? What's the difference between using a 7-step pricing strategy versus a typical agent that just shows up with a CMA? What's the difference?
You're involving the seller, like you're getting them
Okay.
to buy in
Okay,
and determine the price together. I never tell a seller what the price should be.
yep,
I said, I will go through and just say, let's take a peek at what other homes have been selling. And let's kind of figure out maybe what we think we could get for your house.
okay,
So it's not me telling them ever.
is that kind of everybody's approach? Hopefully so, right? That's what we teach, that's where we wanna be, because the seller's gonna try to just drill you down, right? Like, oh, what is it worth? Right, you gotta be able to handle that. And be able to point them back to, no, I brought these pricing tools, we're gonna sit down as a collaborative team, right? Because the biggest thing on a listing form is I want them to feel like that this is a team, right? So if I just come in there and shoot off a price, right? And if we don't sell for that price, whose fault is it? It's mine, right? The seller must take ownership of that part of the process, right? They have to be on board with this pricing based off justification. It all comes down to justification, right? Because if I don't get them to understand the importance of being able to justify a price, what are they gonna wanna do? Yeah, like, I know that house was nicer than mine, I don't care, I wanna price it the same as that, right? So we have to be able to combat that, so yeah. When you walk in and they ask that question, that's how I would respond, right? I have this 7-step pricing strategy and go from there, right? We don't talk about it till we tour the home, right? All of that stuff matters, but that's part of the process, okay? Angela,
To fine tune my process and work on script.
okay, good, and you will find, and we may not even get to it today, but in the back of this, it's loaded with the scripts, okay? So maybe next time we get there, it'll just be scripted off of this, okay, but they are there, please practice and use your objection skill set journals, okay, Christine?
I said, I'm looking for more confidence in vocabulary in regards to the script to continue to show my value and my, with
Okay.
my confidence.
Yep, so that's another key, right? So we hit on the fact we want sellers to take ownership of the pricing part, right? But the other thing is we want to stand out from other agents, right? Is it hard to stand out from your competition right now? I would say no, right? Our market is so saturated with mediocrity, right? There's so many agents that have gotten lazy, even good agents have gotten lazy in the market that we were in, right? And now they realize, like, oh man, how do we have a process? I'm in trouble. Okay, so I think that's important. Jim?
Yeah, it's like the fine thing that I can add to my process that aren't in there, that's further enhance it.
Okay. Yeah, because we're all about that ultimate fan experience, right? That is Again, Buffini ripped that off from this, right? So it's about the ultimate fan experience providing for the client. So who all has went into their seller process and really fine tuned that and made it their own? Has anybody done that? I hope you'll take ideas from this and go change that process, right? Because there's certain steps in there that probably should be fleshed out to your personal style, right? That way, that's how you ensure everybody's getting the same process. Because I can promise you, if you are just relying on memory, when you take a listing, they are not getting the same process. It's just not happening. It'll be generally the same, but it's not gonna be the same. All right, so flesh out that process. Remember, because on your schedule, what's it say? Every single day, there's a block for what?
Full trail.
There's bold trail and in bold trail, but also you should have an A client
A
activities,
client,
right? Yeah,
yeah.
right, everybody should be recognized, A client activities, right? Which means I go to where? Thank you, yes, buyer and seller process, because every buyer I'm working with is in my processes, every seller I'm working with is in my processes. So in my schedule, when I see a client activity, it's the reminder, I don't wanna have to sit there and think about what I need to do for this seller, what I need to do, I don't wanna think about any of that, I don't have the brain power to do that. Okay, especially if I'm working with 4 or 5 buyers, 5 or 6 listings at one time, I don't have the mental capacity to do that, that's why we have systems. So all I need to know is every single day I see that A client activity in my schedule, jump over to my seller process, jump to my buyer process, go through the tabs, each one, boom. Right? Is there anything I need to do for this one today? If there is, do it. If there's not, forget about it. Because if you guys, especially when you're newer or even experienced agents, you'll be taking listings and it's just always on your mind. Did I do everything? Is there more I need to do today? Like what? Carrie's shaking her head. It's like, yeah, we know. It's like, no. I need my brain power freed up for other things, right? Prospecting, doing my other tasks. I can't be sitting there engulfed in these few listings that I have. I need to trust my process, right? And if my process says everything's good to go, I move on, all right? If it says you need to do something, do it, right? It's about efficiency. It's about making you better at what you're doing so that what? You accomplish more, right? We reach our goals, okay? All right, Michelle, why are you here? That's generic. Okay, for the sake of time, we're gonna move on. I'll give you that today, okay? All right, so we'll recap pretty quickly here, right? So we talked a lot about our beliefs, right? We talked about, especially with listings, the importance of a win-win. If I believe in a win-win, am I gonna take an overpriced listing? No. However, I did see people taking overpriced listings in the last few years and the dang thing sold. Damn, okay? But, so we need to be aware of the market, but generally be careful of that, okay? All right. We talked about being a pricing strategist, all right? We talked about who determines the price, right? Some of that stuff. We talked about the importance of leading sellers down the path of self-discovery. This is what sets you apart, right? And remember, we talked about the importance of this because it's not only in pricing that the sellers become our teammates, right? They are our teammate through the entire process. If you do that, it's an entire team pulling towards the same goal. If you do not have your seller on board with you as a teammate, what's going to happen?
Frustrating.
There's going to be frustration, yeah, chaos, right? They could be pulling in different directions than you. They start blaming you, right? And then what happens is I don't want to make my weekly call to them. So I'm like, oh man, they're probably upset. Not much is going on, right? So I don't make the call. And then 2 weeks go by and I'm like, wow, we haven't had a showing. Now I really don't want to call, right? That's what happens. The next thing you know, 30 days have gone by and I haven't talked to my sellers. Unacceptable, right? Like we can't do that, but it happens. You know, one of the #1 complaints from frustrated sellers?
They didn't have communication.
Lack of communication, yeah. They didn't hear from their agent, they didn't know what was going on. That's why you have an entire marketing strategy. Remember, the second question they asked is what? What are you gonna do to get my home sold? And you would better have that strategy figured out. I recommend actually have a marketing packet in place that we can give them, right? Always did that comprehensive sales strategy that I would sit down with them and say, look, here's what we're gonna do. Here's the first step, here's the second step, right? So that every time I call them I've always called on Fridays, right? I call them and I say, hey, Here's what happened this past week, we go over our broker bay, we go over list track, we go over any boosting that we did, so we cover all that. We cover any feedback, and then they're already aware, and we'll touch base and say, okay, next week, here's what we're doing, right? Is there anything about that plan you wanna change, right? So the seller is on board with that, they're always aware of what you're doing, right? They know you're working for them. And that makes a huge, huge difference with sellers, right? Because now they're invested in this, right? They're engaged with you. They know what's going on and they're working with you to get this sold. Versus me having to sit there in silence over the phone and they say, well, what are you gonna do now? Well, what do you think we should do? Well, I don't know, I hired you, right? Like, you're supposed to know these things. Then what are they gonna say? Well, let's do an open house. And you're like, wow. Right? And if I'm not confident enough in my process, I'm gonna say, oh, that sounds great. Yeah, let's do it. Right? I'm happy to give up my Saturday for that on the sale house. Yes, let's do it. Okay? Yeah, so we have to have the confidence in our process. We have to be able to lead them to the right price point, right? We have to have self-discovery. They have to be a teammate, all right? So there's some agents who fail to effectively lead sellers to that price point. Would you agree?
Yes,
Why?
they don't
What
research.
did you say, Bree? People please, that's a big one, right? Like, yeah, we like to tell people what they wanna hear, right? That's a mistake. Okay, what Carrie would you say?
The agents didn't, do enough, research on it.
Okay, failed to do their research. If you follow our 7-step pricing strategy, that won't happen, I promise. Okay, but what else? How about this? Lack knowledge, confidence, and judgment, or don't care. Do what? Or they're hungry, yep. But if I'm truly hungry, I should want a listing that's gonna sell, right? Yeah, I don't want to overprice one that's gonna, because here's the deal, you take an overpriced listing, anyone that's done it, you ever had that, and it just sits, and it sits, and you end up with an ulcer, right? You say that before, right? Yeah, we've all had that, right? Because you're almost sick to your stomach, you see the seller calling, right? Because it's like, oh man. All right, so yeah, it's like, we don't want to do that, right? Because it could be a lack of knowledge. I remember going on a listing appointment, I was the second agent in to compete, and I sat down and I did my thing, and the seller was like, wow, that is way different than the agent that came in before. I was like, okay, and you know what they brought out, what that agent brought? You know what that agent brought? A bunch of MLS sheets, right? For the wrong neighborhood.
Oh.
It wasn't even
Ouch.
close, right? So do you think we had any trouble winning that one? No, it wasn't even close, right? But lack of knowledge, lack of training could be. What about confidence?
So an example, if I can share an
Please
example.
do.
Probably just shy of 2 years ago, I had been the second agent.
Mm.
And they almost signed with the first agent, and I came out, I did all of my research, sat down with them. And didn't even ask about what the second agent had said, and I said, let's go through this process and let's start uncovering what we think the price is. And I'm looking at them like, I'm thinking 400,000 should be good, and he's looking at me like, are you crazy? And I said, no. And so they ended up signing with me, we ended up selling at 440, and when they closed, before closing, I said, so out of curiosity, I said, that other agent, they're like, she told us 300,000, maybe 325. But we almost signed and would have lost over $100,000.
Yeah.
So it really does make a point to be very confident when you walk in and have the knowledge because you've researched it really well.
Yeah. And that's always a good thing when I can tell them more than they think, right? Sometimes you get the opposite. Has anybody ever had that whenever you show up and it's a pretty high driver, right? Yeah, they are a driver and they want to tell you what that house is worth, right? That is a true test of your confidence right there. If you can withstand that onslaught of this seller telling you you're crazy or whatever, right? But remember, if you follow this process, it's gonna make it so much easier, because again, I'm not gonna have the conversation. And I remember being on one listing, like, we're just doing the tour of the house and we're walking around outside and the guy keeps going, so what do you think? What do you think? What can we get? We're not gonna have this conversation yet, right? We're gonna finish the tour, we're gonna sit down, right? And I'm gonna present to you what? My pricing tools, right? And collectively, we're gonna come up with this price. Don't fall victim to that pressure of a seller trying to just push you into giving them a number, okay? Or they'll spit something out and they are so domineering, you're like, we're way off, you know, and so then in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, I can adjust my thoughts on my pricing tools a little bit to get us closer, right? You must have the confidence to be able to what? Lead them down self-discovery. And we talked about, like, if they don't get to that point, they're an unreasonable seller. Why would I take the listing with an unreasonable seller? Yeah, I might be hungry, but an overpriced listing is not gonna sell, right? And it's not a win-win. And again, I end up starting to hate my job, right, as a realtor because of this one client. Oh, ever had that?
Yes.
It's just like that one client is just kind of ruining you're just kind of like, I hate my job, you know? Yeah, we've all probably experienced that. Well, guess what? If we hold to some of our core beliefs, we can eliminate some of that, right? Because it's like, I'm gonna identify you pretty quickly, and we're probably not gonna have a relationship. But I have to have enough confidence, right? And ability to generate other opportunities, right? Because when you're hungry, remember what Buffini says? It's like when you're hungry, you'll show up and the seller will tell you what you're gonna price it at. He's gonna tell you that you're gonna do open houses every weekend. You're gonna take a reduction on your commission, right? And what does that agent say? Man, that sounds great. Sign me up, right? Yeah, so we gotta be very, very careful, okay? I remember one time Jim and I, we sat down and we did a buyer consult, and both of us saw some warning flags going off pretty darn quick. You remember that one, Jim? She wanted to tell us all about her personal life, and then it started just getting strange. And we got out of there and Jim's kind of like, fuck that. Yeah, we didn't work with her, okay? It's like, you know what, let's move on from that, okay? I have to be okay doing this. Same is true with sellers, okay? Judgment, not caring, all right? We're part of RE/MAX, and I believe every one of us in here cares, right? We are relationship driven, so that one should never be an issue for us. So this just kind of breaks down. You will have these pages again. We're just recapping. I'm spending too much time here. How we facilitate intelligent decisions. Okay, remember, we are advisors. We are not salespeople. Some people come in and tell me they're good at sales, and I'm like, that doesn't mean anything to me. How are you on relationships? Are you an advisor? Are you a consultant? Right? We talked about the more effective way. We talked about monologue versus dialogue. There is a difference between them. What is the difference?
Monologue is more direction, dialogue is more communication and cooperation.
I'll go with that, right? Yeah, it's a conversation versus me going in there and just telling, right? So that's what we call our listing appointments, what? Listing conversations, right? Okay. We don't want to be typical. We talked about that. What does it mean to be typical? There's a lot of typical agents out there, right? Which means that what? There's a lot of room for us to gain market share. Because remember, 90% of people say they use the same agent, right? How many do? 17%. Okay. So there's tons of business out there for us to get. Okay, there's the bottom line. People will follow what we can logically and tangibly explain. Okay. Just like with your marketing, there needs to be a reason why you do what you do. Okay. You don't go up to a seller and start talking about HDR photography and they ask you about it and ask you why you do it. You say, oh, that's just what my broker said to do. It's like, no, I need to be able to explain to them why I do this. All right. There's a big one. What about Matterport 360? Everybody knows Matterport 360, right? We're talking about marketing, right? So do we like that or do we not? Why do we not like it? It's frustrating. Okay, can you elaborate? Like,
It's clicking, they're always on their cell phones, they don't want to
Okay.
click through the dang thing, go through the whole
Okay.
thing, through that, it's just.
okay.
Too much, they can watch it.
So I could make an argument off of that. I would agree with that. What else?
I've found lately that people love the 2D floor plan,
Okay.
period.
So then your conversation with the seller is, because we know Matterport's gonna cost me $200 or $300, right? But if a seller's asking about it, I need to have a response. I can't just say, well, I don't want to spend the $300, right? That's not gonna work, right? So it could be, it's frustrating to buyers. You could say, we've actually found something that buyers prefer much more, right? Here's my biggest problem with Matterport, and I've had this conversation with sellers, and they're like, that makes complete sense to me. Matterport is a matter of going around screenshotting all these angles of the room and they stitch them together, correct? You ever notice how small it makes those rooms?
Yeah.
Right? Like even the windows start going,
Yep.
your wall outlets are, right? Why in the world would I want to use that marketing strategy if I had a house that really wasn't that big to begin with? Right? So if I can logically explain to them, hey, this is probably not a good strategy for your house to use that. Instead, I'm going to use a lifestyle video. I'm going to use the floor plan, right? Like those are the conversations you should be having, right? Because when you sit down and go through a marketing plan with your seller, hopefully you have those key points. Hopefully you can explain why we do the open house the first weekend, but not the second, third, fourth, fifth, unless I'm doing a price reduction, right? If I don't have that conversation, then they're gonna want an open house on the second, third, fourth, fifth weekend, right? Don't wanna do that, right? Same with why we do our photos the way that we do them, right? Because do most agents out there use HDR now?
Oh, they should.
They should be. Now, every once in a while, you still see someone in the mirror with a cell phone.
Wait till
You're like, and you should be shocked, right? Yeah, so most are using HDR, but are you taking the time to explain that to the seller? All right, hopefully we are. It's about standing out. Hopefully everybody can explain first out what HDR stands for.
high definition resolution.
Okay, and why do we use it? What difference does it make? Details, okay.
Looking better on.
But how do I explain it? How do I explain it to a seller? To make it like, oh, wow, that sounds great. Remember, it's about separate, we're all probably gonna use it most, but why am I spending the time with the seller to explain it?
So that was invaluable.
Okay, so how do I explain it?
The most compatible with MLS and other platforms,
Very compatible, okay,
photography, to make it, I guess.
okay.
Keeps lights and windows from being,
Keeps,
lights and windows from being blown out.
yeah, that's the one I like to go to a lot. Like, have you ever seen pictures, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, where you look at the light, and it's like this big glowing orb,
Yes.
right? Or you ever seen a window and it's this big glowing, like the sun is right outside, right? That's what some agents will choose to use, right? However, we use HDR, which is high definition resolution, right? Which means every single detail of your house is gonna be on display for people to see. When they look at your light fixtures, they're gonna be able to see actually how beautiful those fixtures are because HDR is going to detail that for you. People will be able to see the lake outside this window because HDR is gonna show what it's like to be sitting in your kitchen looking out at the lake from this window, right? Does that make it sound a little bit better,
Yes.
right, than just Lord use HDR? It's great, it's professional. No, those things are fine, but I need to be able to explain why we're doing it, okay? I say all that to say we have to be able to logically and tangibly explain to a seller these things to set us apart, okay? Some people want to go strictly off price per square foot. Is price per square foot a consideration? Yes, it can be, all right, but there are a lot of other factors that go into this, right? That is not the only thing, all right? I have used it before because I've had a seller, all these similar type properties, and they wanted a price here, and I says, okay, well, let's do some math. That means you're gonna get X amount per square foot, which is $90 a square foot more than any other home in your neighborhood has ever gotten. Can you explain to me the justification behind pricing it at that point? Well, I just think it's worth that. In our pricing packets or our listing packets, right, we should have a sheet that says, here's common seller mistakes. Pricing because what? Oh, that's just what I think it's worth. That's how much I have in it. That's how much I want, right? That's how much I need for my next house. Pricing mistakes, okay? All right. It can be a component. Here are some things we talked about considering. You can look at those, right? Are these things that you currently take into account? We should be, all right? We'll talk about a few of those more. Do not overwhelm the client with a 40-page CMA. Be careful with that, okay? Now, some CMAs will get lengthy. Megan's smiling, right? Some of them will be lengthy, right? But my opinion is, what should a majority of those pages be? Pictures, right? You start bringing most of them, unless they're analytical, you start bringing them a ton of the graphs and charts and a page that explains it. It's like, nah, they don't need that, okay? It's my job to be able to present to them and lead them down self-discovery. So photos are powerful, right? I usually have the first page, it's kind of like that legend, here's your house, here's all the other ones, right? I go through all the different listings we're using as comparables, and then we'll have a summary at the end, right? This is how long days on market, it's all that, like, that's what we need, okay? Don't be taking them all that other stuff, because they're just gonna check out and be like, this confusing me, okay? But I love the pictures, and we'll talk about how we can use those properly, okay? We need to get going here. All right, we did talk about this, is it an art or a science? It's both.
Yep.
Okay, now the science part comes into what? A process. There is a process, a logical pattern that we go through every time that we price, right? Or should we, all right? The art is experience, right? That gut feeling. I remember being a new agent going out on listings and I was like, I have no clue, right? But the more you do it, right, that art begins to be developed, and you can develop it through training, etc., right? The art is also my ability to communicate what I'm seeing, okay? Can I effectively communicate with the seller what all of these pricing tools here mean? Okay, I have to be able to do that. And all that. Here we go. All right, here we go. 7-step pricing strategy. Okay. This is about a collaborative approach with my seller. And you're gonna see all the homework that goes into before I even show up at this appointment. Okay? Don't just be getting an address, a few basic questions, and then showing up. Okay, do not do that. That is what a typical agent would do. All right. But as you get good at this, it will allow you to quickly become a pricing expert. Okay. If I have the right tools in front of me, can I appropriately price in any neighborhood?
Yes.
I feel so. I feel pretty confident that I can go to any neighborhood and do a pretty good job, right? So what do you do when you're on the listing and the seller's interviewing a couple of you, right? And maybe it's up in Liberty. Right? And the seller's stuck on wanting an agent out of the Liberty office. How are you gonna handle that? What's your response gonna be? They say, well, we really like you. We like what we're seeing, however, there's an agent here in Liberty and we really want an agent that's familiar with our area.
I would ask if, the reasoning behind it. Being familiar with an area is one thing, it doesn't mean you're an expert on pricing a property.
Okay,
So, and I would probably ask, what are the reasons behind that? Just because they're from the area? Is it because you want somebody to be there quickly to show the property? Or is it because you think that they know more than I can gain out of the same tools that they're using to price your home? It has, every neighborhood is unique, but the people that, in my example, they were a Olathe. I'm not in Olathe. And the agent they were interviewing wasn't that market. So I think it's having experiences and being like, is that agent telling you something different on price? Is that one of your guiding, they're telling you a higher price than I am? So,
okay, I like that. Christina, your hand is up.
I would just ratify that I work for Remax, and your listing will go over to 250,000 websites nationwide. And I don't need to be an expert in Liberty because that's not who your buyers are going to be. And I have negotiating skills that I've been trained with from my company that I can communicate with anybody, negotiate with anybody, no matter the area.
Okay, I like that. Those are good. Anybody else have thoughts?
Do you think it's important that they share with me why that's important to you and then just pause? Because the more we verbal vomit, we're giving them reasons, we're giving them to just say, why is that important to you? And pause. And let them verbalize to us, so then we know how to respond instead of us, again, verbal vomiting, well, we're this, or that, or this, and that's just, why is that important to you?
Yeah, and that goes kind of where I was going to carry it on too. It's important to ask questions, right? Because I can make an assumption on why that's important and I can be way off base, right? So what happens is we've got to get into to that point, that curiosity mindset, right? Because all it is they're getting ready to just bring an objection to me, right? That's all it is, right? And so I have to have the confidence to be able to maybe even dig out that objection a little bit, right? Because if I just kind of throw in the towel and say, well, I missed that one, it's like, no. Why? Why is that important to you, right? Okay, and then dig deeper. Okay, so why? Why do you think that is? Why do you feel that way, right? And then as they're doing that, I hopefully have the confidence to be able to come right back with some kind of handler from that, right? Because Christina's right, they're hiring me to be what? The market, like you're hiring me to be a marketer of your property, right? That is what you're hiring me to do. And did I not yet just show my value in this marketing strategy I prepared for your home, right? Did I not show you logical data from my 7-step pricing strategy on what your home is worth, right? Are we in agreement? Do we agree what your home is worth? Yes, great. Do we agree that this marketing strategy I put together is rather phenomenal, if I do say so myself? Yeah, we can agree with that, right? Okay, so we've got price right, we've got marketing right, okay, what other concern would you have? And they may have another, okay, bring it on, right? Have you sold this area? Then we gotta know, it's like, okay, what about my evidences of success, right? What can I take with me as evidence of success? Or I'll give you this, access quickly from the internet. Reviews, what?
We just have access to the MLS, we can pull up.
Okay, yeah, I can pull up my past sales, right? Could I share with them resources to go look at all my past sales? You could go look at the reviews, you can see what people are saying about me. Yeah, I should have all that, so that's why we push you guys to make sure your online presence is as it should be, right? Are we using the agent insight for the neighborhood?
I was just getting ready to say that.
Yeah. How powerful is that? They're questioning your expertise, like, really? Google your neighborhood, right? They pull it up, Google it, and who comes up as the area expert? You do, right? All through the power of SEO through Agent Insight, right? So that means you have to have part of your process before I go out there. I may not need that, but I might, right? And if I did my Agent Insight ahead of time, because that's part of my process, right? I have them Google it and I pop up and they're like, wow. You're like, do you have any other questions? Right? Like, so you see how that's like, we don't just give up. We don't just throw in the towel. It's like, no. Right? I'm gonna fight for myself here. I'm gonna do it in a professional way, a competent way, right? And I'm guessing you're probably gonna win, right? Because the other agents aren't gonna be able to do that. They're gonna just kind of flounder around a little bit like, well, I can sell anywhere. Right? It's like, no, let's get deeper in that, right? So I hope you guys go plug some of that in your objection skill set journal, start practicing that, right? It's like, okay, I want to get good at that if that comes up, right? All right, so let's get here. Step number 1, identify and gain an understanding of the value ranges that exist in the neighborhood. Step number 2, we're going to test that logic using expireds. Okay, we'll talk a little more about that. Are there a lot of expireds right now?
No.
There's really not. We have other things we can look at, all right? Determine the value range most suited for the subject home. To Megan's point, would you agree that every neighborhood is going to have ranges, correct? Now, almost every neighborhood, I would argue, is gonna have 3 ranges, unless it's a neighborhood that's fairly new. And then you might have 2, okay? But if it's an older neighborhood, an established neighborhood, there's gonna be 3 ranges in there. The question is, how do I strategically price myself within the range? And how do I get a seller to understand where to price in the range? Because I promise you, the seller's gonna see that range and where do they wanna be? Top, high end, right? May not work, so we need to know how to have that conversation, right? We're gonna verify the price position chosen satisfies the seller's financial need. Have you ever had to talk a seller out of selling?
Yes.
Yes, right? If you've been around long enough, you will have talked the seller out of selling a house. Because we're gonna compare, this is what their net proceeds are going to be. I know their desire is to whatever it is, this is not gonna work, right? Typical agent's just gonna go out there and take the listing and what will be, next thing you know, they're stuck in a rental somewhere miserable, right? We have to make sure that the financial need part is met. We're gonna analyze the home directly with the competition. You must take into account your competition. Okay, all the sold data is great. What is the active competition? Okay, I'm gonna use Jim again as an example. We had a listing, it was a condo. I think it was up north. We priced it, we thought, man, this is priced good, right? We thought our price was right. Could not get it sold until another agent listed one of the condos in the same subdivision. You remember which one I'm talking about? Significantly higher than ours. And then we sold it. Within a week, we had it under contract. I don't know if you remember that one or not. You what?
I can't remember the investment place. No, I can't.
It might have been, I can't remember, but we were not getting it sold until somebody else priced higher than us. Boom, ours sold. Okay? Do not be the listing that causes other people to sell. Okay? We want to leverage that to where they are helping us sell. Because buyers are looking at everything in the neighborhood. And they're not gonna pick the one that's priced the most, right, if all the houses are equal, all right? They're gonna determine the most appropriate price entry point based on the timing need. How quick does my seller need to move this? Okay, that comes into play as well, okay? So, it's all about self-discovery with these sellers, all right? If we can do this, if we can get to the most appropriate price point, right? We're gonna get fewer objections and more win-wins. Is that what we all would like? Fewer objections, win-wins. Yes, I believe so. All right, for time, we're gonna move right over here. So, it is important to have a broad working knowledge of a neighborhood, right? Now, I can pull that up on MLS, we agree, right? But what else do I need to be looking at when it comes to the actual neighborhood itself?
Parks, schools.
Okay,
shopping.
okay.
So that's what
Okay, yeah. Anything that stands out about that, where do I find that at?
maps.
I can look at a map, right? I can look at the aerial, I can look at this stuff, right? Does anybody ever went and just drove through a neighborhood? Probably not a bad idea, right? Because when I was getting ready to do a CMA, who all uses just the old Google picture for their CMAs? If you can, you should be driving by and snapping a brand new, fresh photo of that house to put on your CMAs. I can't tell you how many sellers see that, like, oh, that's a new photo. Yeah, I came out last week. I checked everything out, got this photo, okay? It's just one of those little things that starts to set you apart, okay? Versus using an old MLS photo, right? Or using a Google photo, okay? We want to be different. Because here, this is a listing. This is potentially an $8, $10, $12, $15,000 commission check, right? Should I do everything possible to secure it? Sure, so why aren't we doing those little things? We should be, right? Because that's gonna help us stand out.
I was
Yes.
just thinking something, because I'm not good about going and doing that, but I was just thinking, I'll show a buyer 20 homes, but I won't drive to the listing prior, just because it's 30 minutes out or whatever it is, and it's like, why not, I would do that for a buyer, over and over again.
But do you know how we make that to where we do it? Becomes part of your process.
Yeah.
You put it in your process and it becomes non-negotiable. It's
Yeah.
like, I have to get that done, right? It's one of the things that I do for my sellers, okay? Because the point is ultimate fan experience. I want them to get done with my process and be like, Sarah is the best agent you will ever work with. I'm gonna refer everyone to you, right? That's how we close that gap from the 90% that say they use the same agent and the 17% that do. Your process has to be so phenomenal, right? And then, of course, your touch plan, which kicks in, right? All of that has to be in alignment. So step number one. Here's our three ranges. So we have high range, low range, mid range, right? I usually call those kind of your turnkey is gonna be that high range, right? So you got a neighborhood built in the 90s, because all the houses are gonna be similar, right? So the high range is gonna be the houses that are turnkey. They've been updated, right? New carpet, new paint, hardwoods, wrought iron, granite, whatever. They're nice, right? And then you have the middle range, which is gonna be what? The houses that are impeccably maintained, but they probably still have the 90s carpet, you know, maybe an older couple lived there, so that means you know your roof, your HVAC is good, right? But everything in the house is the same as when they bought it. But by golly, that linoleum is so nice in the kitchen, you could eat off the floor, right? Because she kept it nice, right? And then we have that lower range, which is what? Fixer up. Can't call it a turd, so we'll call it a fixer up, right? Yeah, that's that one that the carpet's worn, right? It's hasn't been that well maintained, right? It's gonna be that lower range, right? So the important thing for you is whenever you get that initial call from that seller, are we having that very detailed conversation with them about the house? This shouldn't be just a quick 2-minute conversation, right? This is for me to show up and be properly prepared. I need to know about their house. Okay, so everybody should have that seller questionnaire, and it says, these are all the questions that I asked. I would encourage you to use the same one over and over and over and over, okay? Because I want to be asking about any updates and upgrades that they've done, right? I want to ask them about the roof. I want to ask them about the HVAC. Has there been any major projects that they've had done, right? I want to know all that because when I show up, I already want to have a really good idea of which range we're falling into, right? Now, is everybody honest? Nope. I've walked into some houses before and I was like, this is not what I expected at all, right? A lot of times it's for the negative, but every once in a while you walk in and you're like, ooh, this is even better than I thought, right? This is a good one, right? That happens occasionally. But I have to be asking these questions. Don't trust what's in MLS. Okay? Verify that. How many bedrooms do you have? They might have finished the basement, right? There's a lot of agents out there that don't properly put stuff in MLS anyway, right? So I need to make sure I'm verifying all that. But these are some of the things that I'm looking at, right? Clearly, if I'm in MLS, I want to know, okay, the status of the comp, I'm looking at whatever, but all right, so. I will look at price per square foot, but how about bedrooms? Let's say I'm comping at a 4-bedroom. What comps am I gonna look for?
Hopefully 4 bedrooms.
4-bedroom would be ideal. What if I can only find one?
Then I'd probably start looking at 3 to 5.
Yeah, I'll go plus or minus 1, right? Bathrooms, plus or minus a half, hopefully. But if I have to, I'll pull in 1, right? And I can make adjustments for that. Don't go out there on a 4-bedroom and pull a 2-bedroom comp. Please don't do that. Okay, there's a big difference. Okay, I'll go plus or minus 1. Year built, that matters. What's your square footage? Lot description? Yeah, that can matter, right? How big is my lot? What about things like pools and outbuildings? Yeah, that's when things can start getting real complicated. Right? What if I'm trying to comp a house out and it's the only house in the neighborhood with a pool? What am I gonna do then?
I don't like it, and then the next thing.
Okay, so I have several options. One is I can expand out, right? Now I can expand out. I can go back in time a little bit further if I need to, right? That's not the most ideal, but I have to be able to take that into account, right? Do I ever take into account the price to purchase the pool?
No.
You gotta be careful with that, because seller's gonna say, well, I spent $100 grand on that pool. Are they gonna get $100 grand out of it?
You'll have 5.
Not gonna happen. A little more than 5, probably, right? But they're not, it's not gonna be a dollar for dollar thing, right? Not gonna be a dollar, so I have to be able to take that into account, right? Outbuildings can be the same way. Well, I spent 80,000 on that. It's got time, okay. Right? It's not gonna be a dollar for dollar. So these are the things that I need to be looking through this, okay? So that's step number 1 is when I walk into a listing, I should have a really good idea of what that neighborhood's gonna yield, right? Now, be careful on this because sometimes we can get overconfident in this. I've sold in this neighborhood many times. I already know. I know what it's worth. Don't violate your process. Go back through, do it every time. All right, so these are the things that I'm looking at after I've had that really good conversation with the seller about what's going on with their house.
I have something to that.
Yes.
HOAs.
Yep.
I've had lots of problems with HOAs, like either the seller didn't pay theirs and we ended up. Buyer had to come up with that money for the transfer fees, especially check transfer fees. And then just make sure that they either have one or they don't have one. So had 2 instances where they didn't know they had one.
Like we were on the buyer side or the seller didn't know?
Both.
Okay, so a seller should know that, right? And it should be disclosed on the seller's disclosure, hands down, right? But you as a listing agent, right? Your responsibility is to verify that. Matter of fact, I think it's on our process, right? And what is your additional responsibility regarding HOAs as a listing agent?
To get the covenants and restrictions,
Yeah.
you can pass it over to a buyer.
Yeah, all that should be in your supplements. If you're listing a house in an HOA, shame on us if we are not putting HOA CCRs in our supplements, right? You need to do that. There's plenty of agents that don't, you know how frustrating that is, that's on the buyer side. Whenever I'm showing a house and potentially wanna write an offer, and they're like, well, I need to check some things on the HOA, and I look and there's no HOA docs. Now I have to go out and find, I'll do it, right? But it's either I have to get title involved, if I can't find their website, right, it's like, no, as a listing agent, that's your job. Right, your job is to make sure you have the right legal description, and that you have the right HOA documents, right, that's just part of the process. If you do that, buyers agents will love working with you, okay, so we should be doing that. Hold on, there was one other thing I wanted to touch on this, and I lost it. Okay, yeah, testing logic on expired listings, this is step 2, right? How many expired listings do we have right now?
Minimal.
Very minimal, I agree with that, right? So if I don't have expireds to go, what can I look at?
Days on market.
Okay, days on market, I can look at that, yes,
But look at maybe active properties with the days on market.
okay,
Like they were probably overpriced if they've been on the market longer than some of the other properties.
yeah,
Like just do, you know, pull a couple of those out. Cause people will look and say, well, that house is selling for, I'm like, no, it hasn't sold.
Yep.
That's what they're asking for.
Yep. So to that point, it's important for me to know if a house is priced appropriately, what's average days on market for your neighborhood? I need to know that, right? And I can pull that, right? And then for houses that are sitting longer than that, I need to compare, is their price in alignment with the ones that went under contract in the amount of time expected, right? And if not, if they're above, I can very clearly see buyers are rejecting this price. So Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if they wanna give me pushback, right? And they say, well, yeah, but the house right here is listed for you, so, oh, and it's still sitting, right? Because I would have expected it to sell in X number of days, right? So if we go after that price, why would we expect any different result? They're gonna be like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense, right? So I can look at that days on market, even the houses that have sold, go back and look at their price history, right? Did they go on at a different price? Did they get a different price than what they were listed at? Did they have to do any price reductions, right? I need to do that extra step. It's a little extra homework, right? But I want to be prepared in case the seller said, now we want an extra 20. Well, here's these 3 that sold. They tried that, had to drop.
And we keep in mind, most sellers have no way of finding knowledge of what the sold prices are because we are a non-disclosure state. So they go to Zillow, they go to realtor.com, they go anywhere, they're not gonna see what the house sold for. MLS is where we come in and fill in the gap for them.
Yeah, and that's a huge value add, right? So we're gonna do the same thing. We're looking at all these houses, days on market. If they are expired, can I also look at cancel? I could look at cancel, right? Because it's possible that those sat on the market for a while and the seller got frustrated and just says cancel it. Okay, it didn't sell in the first 2 weeks, I'm canceling, right? I can use that as additional ammunition that no, they tried it at this price and they were unsuccessful. Okay, because remember, it's about getting a seller to understand. All they see is just the active prices out there. To that point, I need to get there, no, this is what sellers tried, it was unsuccessful. Okay, therefore, we're going to take a different approach, okay? All right, we're gonna wrap it there, and then next time, we're gonna jump back into step number 3. All right, so I hope you guys will each be back for that class, will be in step number 3, and then we will get into some of the scripting at that point, okay?
Okay,
All right.